everybody. For those of you that are brand new and don't know who I am, welcome. I actually have a YouTube channel called Divine Warrior Intuitive, and I created that channel. Actually, it's very new, and it's because of some life changes back in 2020. So if you're watching this later, welcome. So what it's about is I came out of the closet as a empath. So it took me almost 60 years to do that. And I'm hoping that this will touch somebody in the future to know that having abilities is okay. Having gifts from the divine God, whoever you call that, is what you're supposed to be doing. And this is the gifts that they gave you, and knowing that it's okay. So for many years, I swished it and I denied it. I wouldn't allow them to happen. And the reason why that is because family and friends and things like that. And so I would just act like I was everybody else. And deep inside, I was screaming to get out. I felt very alone. And that's been since a child. So these abilities have been happening since I was very young. And even my mom, at one age when I was in my 20s, she said, "Oh, you have what grandma has." And lo and behold, I thought she would be closed off to it because she's a very Christian woman. And so having the life of an empath is very challenging, especially if you don't walk in truth with yourself. So that's what I'm here for, is I'm going to do a part 1, maybe part 2, and hopefully open the door for some of you people out there thinking that maybe, am I an empath? Am I not an empath? What is an empath? And sometimes people think that they're empaths when they're really not. So I belong to a couple of Facebook channels or Facebook pages, and supporting and helping people get through that and understanding if they are an empath. But a lot of people literally are not. They're very intuitive, but that doesn't make an empath. So let me get started from the very beginning. And I'm not going to go and bore you with all the details, but as a young child, I knew I was different. I knew things ahead of time before they even happened. And those I just sort of blew off. As kids do, we just want to go and we want to fit in and we want to be like everybody else. And before I got into, I think it was junior high, I was considered, "You're a weirdo." I'm considered, "Wow, she's weird, she's strange, don't talk to her," that kind of thing. So it really hurt my feelings a lot because I didn't have a very good childhood. So some people ask me, is it related to abuse? So yes, I was abused as a kid, sexually abused, emotionally abused, verbally abused. But that was, I don't believe that that is the case of it. I think we are born. There is no scientific proof to say that because anything of the unseen is unknown, right? So what we want to look at is maybe when and where it started, and maybe when it would begin to get squashed. So as a child, I thought it was fine and okay, and I didn't have any problem with it. And then my mom said when I was really small, I used to have a pet rabbit that nobody could see. Well, I'm a much of an animal person, and empaths are. But as I grew up, I learned to squish it because I didn't want to be considered weird. I didn't want to be considered strange. I was already going through my own turmoil of a family member and trying just to make it through and live through that. I just decided to squish it. I just decided, and most empaths will because they don't want to deal with that. In fact, even now, some empaths I talk to, they think it's a curse and they don't want anything to do with it. It's a blessing. Let me tell you, people, if you have abilities, it is a blessing. You just have to learn how to embrace them, how to use them. But I will tell you that it is a very lonely life, as far as knowing that you will live more by yourself than you will with others. And it can be, I shouldn't say it's lonely, because for me, I'm cool with it. But a lot of people get very lonely, very depressed, and they can't understand and they can't deal with that because maybe they're a social butterfly. So as an empath, as I'm growing up as a child, I squished it. And I would not allow my abilities to happen. But deep inside, they'd keep popping up. I kept being reminded that you are different. You have some abilities. I'm waiting for you to accept them and allow them to come out. Even though I would know things ahead of time, I would never tell anybody about it. I would never say anything. I would just nod politely and say, yep, okay, I already knew what, but I was just sort of whatever. I was considered very sensitive. Oh, you're so sensitive. And in my age, now that I'm 60, that was actually an insult, that you're too sensitive. You take things too seriously. Well, empaths do think differently. We do think different. We take actually the things that are really important in life and we hold them dearly because we know that material things don't matter. And we can't explain our wisdom because they would, again, think we're weird. So what do? We want to fit in. We don't talk about it, right? So it wasn't until actually, I would probably say close to my 30s, that I wouldn't even allow anything to come in. But then it began not to be something that I could control. I didn't know how to control it. I didn't even know what an empath was back then. I didn't even know what an empath was until my 58th year. So what I was finding out, I was working for a company and things were beginning to turn and churn. And I would, like in one home, for example, so for those of you that are listening, let me explain a couple of things. So an empath, if you're not sure what that is a person that has extreme sensitivities to things. They can feel energies. They can feel auras. We can also know when things are going to happen ahead of time. And that's not clairvoyant. That's a different thing. There's so many different kinds of empaths. You might be able to feel animals' energies. You might be able to feel illnesses. You might be able to actually take in somebody's illness. But for me as an empath, I have a very audible type of ability. I feel I have very strong sensitivities to auras and energies. I can read a person's energy. In fact, and I'll go back into that here in just a second, when I go back to my 30s, when everything began to explode. I actually have, not only that, a sense of knowing ahead of time, but I also became even more and more sensitive, and I'll go into that. So it's not an empath will think, oh, well, I have a great intuition. That's one thing. That's part of it. My intuition, and that's why I do Divine Warrior Intuitive, and I do Intuitive Tarot. I do intuitive coaching. I do spiritual coaching. I do things like that. To help people grow their abilities, but not only that, to get closer to the divine, because that's what we're using it for. We're not using it for us. We're using it for love and truth and walking in a light vibration, light energy way, because that's where divine is. So let me go back to my early 30s when all this really began to explode out of my control. So working not only for a company, I was beginning to hear things, and sometimes, and I'll give you an example here. And I also could feel things. For example, I had a poltergeist one time in my house, and I was like, okay, I moved into an apartment very early. In the first night, I had a waterbed back then. And so I slept that first night. And I'm one of these people that when you move into a place, I set it all up that first night. I can't stand a house that's not set up. So maybe take me a day or two. But that first night, I'm to a point where I'm comfortable. But my bed is really cold because I have a water bed. So I pack on all the blankets and I'm going to sleep on it. So I do. And then all of a sudden, I wake up in the morning and I had back then, I lived in Japan, so we saw Michael Jackson in concert there. I had a t-shirt collection that I had on the wall, and that was all ripped half off of my wall. I went into the living room. All my plants were knocked over. I thought, that's weird. Did I put them on the carpet wrong? Did I move them wrong? What did I do? And I was like, And then I thought to myself, but why are half my t-shirts down? And I thought to myself, so I called my girlfriend and I said, something really weird happened. Can you come over? And she's like, oh, okay. And she's like, well, that is really weird. So I just put everything back up, didn't think about it. Next night, go to bed. And then I have, and a lot of people say, oh, that was just because you're half asleep, the sleep paralysis stuff. No, I was wide awake. And then I had a gentleman who was not there, but he was in army fatigues pushing my pillow down on my face. And I was like, okay, I have to play dead here. Now I'm really scared. I have to play dead here. So what do? Play dead, stop breathing, that kind of stuff. And then it went away. And I got up, and of course my heart is pounding. And I told my girlfriend that, and she's like, we need to clean the apartment. And I'm like, what do you mean clean the apartment? Because only a week or two after that, blood-curdling screams coming out from outside the house. A long story short, asked the neighbors, did you hear that? Did you hear that? They're screaming at the blood-curdling. Somebody was either being raped or killed or something outside my window. Nobody heard a sound. So that was the beginning of how I was like, okay, now my abilities are becoming awake. So what do I do with this? I was confused. It's a very, very confusing time, unsure time. And if you don't have anybody able to sit there and go to, you just sort of get a little nervous and lost, and you don't talk about it to anybody. So you're living in your own silence and fear. So I left that apartment. After a couple of years, we did clean the apartment. Things did settle down. But unfortunately, that spirit, which we think was probably somebody who passed away from Vietnam or in the army, that was their home, and they just didn't like somebody being there, somebody new. So I moved, and that spirit seemed to follow me because I was like, what is that shadow on the wall? Okay. So during that time, I had more audible abilities. So when I first saw my shadow, I was like, okay, not my shadow, but a shadow go across my kitchen. I was like, this is not comfortable. This is not comfortable at all. So that's when I had to seek out some help. And so if you are an empath, or you're even thinking that you're an empath, don't worry, you're not going crazy. You know why? I know for a fact you're not going crazy. What it is you will think you are crazy. When my abilities began to explode, even just after that, then what happened next gave me reassurance that I wasn't really, really nuts. So those two things happened, and then I began to hear even more and more and more. And I was working a job as a security person where in a company, I won't say their name because I don't know if I can, but it's a very big corporation. Everybody knows who it is in the United States. But I was working for them, and then I started getting audios, but then now the sensories started coming in. I'd walk by somebody and I was like, ooh, that did not feel good. I wonder what that's about. And then I'd walk by that same person again and, ooh, I wasn't sure what. I mean, I'm getting even goosebumps talking about it. I didn't like that feeling. What was that about? And I thought, okay, I'm security. Let's go watch them. Maybe they're going to steal or something, And so what happened was, excuse me. What happened was, I would follow them, and then all of a sudden I heard a voice. Go to the place where you first saw them. And I thought, okay, what was that? And I thought, that's just me thinking to myself, right? Now, as an empath, those things can happen to you. So don't worry, it's normal. So what happened next was, again, I would just poo-poo it because I thought, oh, it's just me. Then the next thing that happened again is I'm walking, go to the aisle that you saw him first. And I thought, okay, now that wasn't me. And I'm like, now I'm a little nervous. And who is this? Because I thought, I'm still going crazy, right? So the third time was louder and more strong. Go to the aisle that I told you to, where you first saw them. And I'm like, oh my God, I am going nuts. I am literally going nuts. All right. But I don't want to hear this voice anymore. So I go to the aisle. I go to the aisle and I actually stand one aisle behind because I want to watch through to see if he literally really comes, which I knew he wasn't. It was just maybe I'm going crazy, right? So I sit there and stupidly I'm talking to myself saying, see, he didn't come. There's nobody there. I'm just going nuts. Now, remember, this is all brand new to me, right? So I sit there and I'm waiting and I'm watching nobody. And I'm like, see? And as I get ready to start to walk off, there he comes into the aisle straight where I was told he would be. Now I'm scared stiff, shaking in my boots, wondering what the heck is happening. Who is talking to me? And I'm like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? You know, I'm security. What do I do? I knew what to do. I couldn't take my eyes off of him because if I did, then if he was going to steal, I wouldn't be able to apprehend him. So what did I do? I sat there and watched him. Now the interesting thing, his back is to me. He's got his arm in a cast, right? And he sits there and he's got a vest on, a down vest. And I'm like, okay, what's he going to do? So he's holding and he turns and looks to the left. He turns to look to the right. Now he's in the tool aisle, remember. He's in the tool aisle, okay? So he's in the tool aisle. He's got like drills and hammers and all that kind of stuff. And he turns and he looks to the left. Then he looks to the right. And I'm not joking you. He turns around and looks me straight in the eye. And I thought, okay, that's a bust. Oh, well, thank you. That's a bust. So he's going to walk off and go away. He didn't even see me. Even though I was standing there, he did not even see me because he, again, looked to the left, looked to the right, took that drill, shoved it in his, I'm getting goosebumps, shoving it into his vest, turned and walked the same way he came through the aisle. Now, I was shaking in my boots. I was literally shaking in my boots. And what happened next was, I'm like, I can't let him go. I can't stop looking at him. I just don't know what else to do. So now this is how the divine works. This is why you have to go to the divine. This has nothing to do with me. But I'm so scared and nervous of everything that's happening to me as a new empath with these abilities. I'm like, I'm losing it, right? So what happens is I follow him. And lo and behold, that day happened to be the owner of the company, my manager, the owner of, or his team, you know, his security guards and all that kind of stuff. They were all right there next to the aisle that I had to pass him by. So I'm sitting there shaking. I don't know what to do. I can't believe all that's happened. I look at my manager. My manager looks at me, who they're all talking as a team because they're discussing the store. And I'm like, and he sees me and sees something's wrong. And I'm like, I'm on him. He's got a drill. And they don't understand what's going on because they don't know what's happening to me. I said, but he's got a drill. I'll follow him. So I followed him all the way around the store. The manager and the owner looked at me like, is she okay? And went to the front. As by the time I got to the front of the store, the guy was there. He walked out the store with the drill. My manager and his team confronted him, and he took off running. Now, that's the first instance of this actually starting. So now what happens next? I get this same thing happening over and over, week after week. I am catching shoplifters left and right. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know the abilities that I'm beginning to get. I know that I had some as a kid, but why the heck what's going on now? So I told my girlfriend, who was a manager at the same store at the time, and I said, I've got to go see a psychiatrist. I'm losing it. This is what's happening. She's the only girl I could tell at all. So I didn't even tell her everything because I thought, oh yeah, somebody's talking to you. Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. All right. So I make an appointment, and I had my daughter in a little carrier at that time. She was probably 6 months old maybe at that time. So this is back in, she was born in 95. Oh my gosh, I didn't even tell you the story about my brother's murder. I'll tell you that in a second. I'm just trying to give you stories here so that you guys can see that things come at you unexpectedly, and it doesn't mean as an empath, some of you will have different abilities. Some of you will hearing. Some of you will see things. Some of you will feel things. Some of you will be really expressive in your emotions. I cry easily. Yes, that's part of me being an empath. You keep me around crystals too long, I'll be higher than a kite. I cannot walk into a crystal room and walk out of there not high in some way. Same as Aquarians. I'm a scuba diver. I used to never have this issue, but as I grew older, these abilities just exploded. I allowed them to explode because that's what the divine was trying to gift me with. And I still was squashed. I'm still squashed at this time. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody had a clue except me and my one girlfriend. So I go to the psychiatrist, and I tell my girlfriend, I went to the psychiatrist, and she asked me, what did you say? What did she say? And I said, well, she asked me to take a test. And I said, sure, take a test. I don't care. And she's like, oh my God, what kind of test did she take? What kind did she have you take? And I told her, I said, I don't know. She asked if I was hearing things. She was asking this and that. And at that time, I'm so naive. I don't even know what's going on. I just know what the heck is going on in this thing here. So she says, oh my gosh, Pat, seriously? They're going to take away your child. I said, what are you talking about? They gave you a schizophrenia test. And I'm like, what's schizophrenia? I didn't even know it was schizophrenia. Her sister was schizophrenic. So she shared with me what schizophrenia was. And I'm like, oh, now I am terrified for a whole week till my next appointment. I'm terrified they're going to take away my daughter. I'm terrified that I'm going really crazy, that I'm going to have. And I sat there and I thought, is this in our family? No, this isn't in our family. What's going on, you know? So in the next week, I left my child at home because I did not want anybody to take my child away from me, and that they were going to lock me up into the loony bin, right? I get to the psychiatrist's office. She has one of those chairs that are straight with the little handles, or with the little, what do you call it? Just the long, skinny things. It's just it's a living room chair, but it's just, and I'm literally clenching and white knuckling because I am terrified that I'm going to get locked up. So the psychiatrist says, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm fine. And so she says, well, your test came back. And I'm like, I must have been white as a ghost. She goes, are you okay? And I'm like, yes, I am. And sorry about that, my daughter. So I said, I'm okay. And she said, well, are you ready? And I'm like, no, but go ahead. And so she says, well, she goes, your test came back normal. And I was like, oh, holy Jesus, thank you. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. And then I'm thinking, okay, so and I said, what's wrong with me? What can you do? How can you help me? And she had this puzzled look on her face, like, I can't believe you're sitting in front of me asking me this. And she looked at me and she says, and this lady was probably a 50s. And she goes, you know what? In all the years of my practice, I have never, ever, ever come across someone like you. And unfortunately, there is nothing I can do for you. Nothing. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, I've never done this in my practice before, but I need to refer you to somebody that handles the paranormal and psychic abilities because I don't know how to help you. And I'm like, say what? Are you serious? And I was like, okay. So she sent me to somebody that really knew nothing. I knew more than she did. I was sitting there like, you're so fakey. So it's been a very long journey. And I know this is 26 minutes long. And I'm trying to keep people's attention with this because it's really important to understand the stages and the different abilities that somebody can have and all the things that can happen to you as an empath. And the thing is to keep vibrations up. I'm going to give one more story before I go. And also, too, if you enjoy this, and there will be more parts to come, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. And that way you can actually see me come on live and talk about this. I probably won't do them through uploads. I love to interact, and thank you for coming on. I love to hear other empaths because it is a very alone type journey. So I would love to do that. There's so much paranormal stuff to me that my daughter has me writing a book. So I will leave with this, though. When you are getting your abilities, and you will feel like you are crazy, because at that point in time in my life, it was happening so fast that I would lay on the sofa all curled up in a ball thinking I was really going nuts. And the only thing that really did help me is a psychiatrist to say, you're normal. Now that's from an earthly level. I had to go outside, but I knew I was different and I knew it was okay because I've always believed in God and a divine. I always believed that because I've always felt really, really close to him. And I have a really good supernatural story about that as well. It's amazing. Oh my gosh, touch. But the last story I'll leave you with, during this same time, it's probably a couple years after that, maybe not even that. So my times get all mixed up. I had my brother, my younger baby brother, who was always a hellion, a little troublemaker and that kind of thing. But we were close. I sort of raised him rather than my mom raised him because they used to just butt heads. And he fought, even as a teenager, alcohol and drugs and things like that. And he got into trouble with the police a lot. So, and we live in Oregon, and my mom had gone through all the counseling. He'd gotten in trouble with the police. He'd gotten all this kind of stuff. And so she didn't know what else to do with him. So mom shipped him off to live in Michigan with my older brother, actually my oldest brother. And he'd been there for a while. He'd broken his jaw here in Oregon riding a bicycle and fell over a thing and broke his jaw. And then while he was living in Wisconsin, he got in a fight and broke his jaw again. And he wasn't happy in Wisconsin. So a couple of his buddies there decided to move to Florida. So when my mother, or I was talking to my mother one day on the phone, because she had lived in Oregon at the same time. Talked to her on the phone, and I said, how's Bill doing? What's going on? How's he? Because I didn't know he had moved to Florida. What's going on? How's he doing? Is he getting any better? Attitude kind of thing. She says, well, I don't know what's going on with him now, but Greg said that he went to Florida with some friends. immediately right there and then, I don't know how, I don't know why, and this is when I began to think, and this is where I'll end this after this story, is that being an empath was a curse. It's not, but at that time, I really thought it was a curse, and I'll share more with that. But the ending of this story is, with that first instant when she said he moved to Florida, I knew he wasn't coming home. I knew that's where his life would end. And it took me, this was probably in 1993. And what happened after that is I fought hard. I'd call him, hey bro, I love you. And he had gotten in trouble with the police down there. And I was like, dude, get your nose clean, because he started being a taxi cab driver. Get your nose clean. I want you to come home, because now I'm in fear that I'm catching these shoplifters. All this stuff has been going on. Things are happening. I'm not quite sure. Get home. I'll send you an airplane ticket. Keep your nose clean. Get off probation. The day you're off probation, you're going to get on this plane and you're going to come home. January 27th. Oh, I'm going to start crying. 1994. Got the phone call. This is part of being an empath. But I tell my story because it's not a curse. I got to tell my brother how much I loved him, how much he mattered. And I know he's going to be around forever. That's part of being an empath. That's where I'm going to end my story today. But don't give up. If you have the abilities, listen to part 2, and we'll share more. And I'll pick up from here, and I'll show you the beauty through his death. Yeah, I'll show you the beauty there. So, blessings. Listen to the divine. Go to God for your source. Go to God for everything. Even as an empath, you need him to get through this. And I will share more abilities, more ghost stories, more paranormal stuff the next time. Hey, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. I love telling the stories, but I also want to help somebody out there through their abilities and being an empath as well. Thanks for listening.